that's a good idea.
Yeah. And you can put a layer of paper towel inside, which apparently is very effective.
Ah.
So yeah.
Great. I can just sew a couple of those up too. It's gonna
Okay, guys, we are live.
Yay!
All right, let me just get this camera up and ready. And, oops. And finally.
700 steps today.
Okay, so this second camera is designed to give you all an overhead view of the cooking process. So new feature. So if any point you want to look at what's going on the stove, you can put up a gallery view, or you can just click on this other camera that is up on the side there. Do you guys see it, or did it go away?
Adam, right now it's just showing your face.
No, there's a second camera. So this one right here.
Yeah, now it's on.
Okay, good. Okay, so everybody ready to cook?
Woohoo!
All right, we're gonna start off. Well, let's talk. We're making meatballs and we're gonna make a sauce. As most of you know, I owned a meatball truck. I've made a lot of meatballs in my life. Probably too many for my preference. Let's go ahead and everybody mute if you're not talking, because it looks like it has pinned Sarah. Sarah, you need to mute yourself because it's defaulting to you.
I was muted.
Okay, so we're gonna make a sauce first. And there's a couple little steps that we'll make in order to get to the path of the finished meatballs. Actually, before the sauce, what I want to do is those of us who want to do the gelatin part, we're going to make a quick gelatin because we got to get that in the fridge. So if you have your little packs of Knox gelatin, what you want to do is take about 1/3 a cup of beef stock and go ahead and get that on the stove on medium to high heat. And we're going to use that to put our gelatin in it, and then we're going to bloom it. Now, the purpose of the gelatin, excuse me, I actually learned this somewhat recently. I would say it's been a year and a half. To do this, to add the beefy flavor of the stock without it wet, making the batter too wet. You use the gelatin. This came from Serious Eats. Highly recommend Serious Eats when you're looking for cooking hacks, techniques, great recipes. They have a lot of great stuff. So this came from them, and I thought it was brilliant, and I've been using it, and it adds just a nice juiciness to the meatball. You don't have to do it. I did it for years without it, but it's been a great addition. I'm gonna put it in a shallow bowl once I do that. So I'm just heating up, you can see from the stove shot, I'm heating up a little bit of stock, and then I'm gonna add the gelatin in this little bowl, and then I'm gonna put this in the fridge or the freezer because you want it to set pretty quickly. It takes about 15-20 minutes to set. So by the time we get to final mix on the meatballs, we will pull it from the fridge. So that's our step one. Step two is gonna be making this quick sauce. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. If I didn't have stock, can I use broth?
Yes, broth is fine. You know, the only difference between broth and stock is really the fat content. You know, a broth is usually made with the meat on the bones, whereas a stock is usually just made with the bones. So I think stock is a better cooking base, but if you don't have it, then by all means go for a broth. And the last time we cooked, I actually gave the hierarchy. It's always stock, fresh homemade stock is the best. And then a high quality fresh homemade broth would be next. And then store-bought stock and store-bought broth. So in that order. And then you can always substitute vegetable broth. In this recipe, I don't understand why you would do that because this is a meat-based recipe. But there's a lot of recipes where if you want to make it a vegetarian recipe, vegetable stock would work. So the sauce we're going to make, yeah.
Real quick, how many grams is in your package? Because I have a big bag of gelatin.
It does not. It's not labeled for individual sale. I would guess that it's probably 3 grams or so.
Sorry.
9 with the packaging. So let's call
Thank
it
you.
7.
Thank you. Sorry.
So the sauce that I'm making is, when I had the food truck, this was our quick sauce. This was the sauce that if you need to make a sauce in a hurry, it's also a great sauce for pasta. It's very similar to, if you've ever had Delfina's spaghetti and tomato sauce, this is very similar to their sauce. It's pretty similar to Rails as well. So if you buy Rails in the jar, but we're making it fresh. And the concept here is we're going to take and start by sweating down some garlic. So you're going to want to get garlic and an onion. And we're going to add the garlic to the oil, and we're going to sweat it down. We're going to let it cook for a few minutes while we make our meatball mix. And we're going to try to get as much flavor into the oil as possible from the garlic. So I'm almost at a boil here.
For the gelatin question,
Yes.
pack it like this and just throw it in the broth.
I don't see you. Let me just unpin my video.
Sorry, man.
And you said 1/3 cup?
About 1/3 cup. Yeah.
2/3 for us.
How do I unpin my video?
Okay, so we got
Yeah, there are these little packets that came in here, not for individual sales. So we'll just do.
Yeah. It's this right here. Same thing, Chad.
Oh yeah. Okay.
one cup, please.
All right. So once this thing is heated up, add, mix, and then I'll probably use a little whisk.
Whole pouch?
And then in yeah, you can see it automatically. It already starts to set. So
You used the whole pouch, Adam?
yeah, I did. You can see I'm just mixing it up to get it fully incorporated. And then I'm going to pour it in my little ceramic here. And I'm going to pop it in the freezer because it'll set faster in the freezer. Of course, my freezer is jam-packed. Okay, so let's get on to the sauce. And the objective with the sauce is to get some oil. Now I'm using, everybody who did the tortilla española with me, you may have some oil left over from that had some flavor to it. I mentioned onions and whatnot. So I'm going to use that oil because it's already good olive oil that has some good flavor. And I'm going to pour a few tablespoons of that, maybe 3 tablespoons of that. And I'm going to take maybe 3 or 4 garlic cloves, depending on the size of them. And we're going to just smash the garlic cloves so that we're going to cut the tips off of them, and then we're going to smash them. Remove the peel.
Zolot, confirmation. We're working on sauce.
Yes.
Thank you.
So you want to get a little smash on it so that it breaks up but doesn't completely fall apart. You want whole pieces. Pop that in your oil, and then you're going to put your oil on a pretty low temperature.
And
The idea here is that if you cook your garlic too high, it's going to start to get bitter, and it won't help the oil in the same way than if you cook it low. So we're also going to put a cover on it because to sweat it, we want to keep the moisture in. So I'm going to put it on the lowest possible heat I can on this burner. And then I'm just going to cover it and let it sit. Now, it's interesting because I came to this recipe years ago, and when I read cookbooks, I see that a lot of chefs do the same stuff. So I feel good about where I came to with this recipe. Now next we're gonna prep our oil or our onion. So we're gonna use the onion in both the sauce and the meatballs. So you want a size of a chop that's going to be applicable for both. Again, technique on the onion, same as we've done all the other times, except this time we're gonna do the onion in the way that I've been talking about, not against the grain. So everybody grab your onion and you're gonna cut the stem side off. Let me get my butter knife. And then again, you're gonna half it from the top, peel, and you'll use half of it in your sauce, and then half of it will cook and then remove, and then we're gonna cool that for the meatballs. We want the onion to be cool when we put it in the meatball, because I don't like putting hot things into raw things. What happens is, from my perspective, you get hot spots and it starts to cook things in the raw, and then when you want to cook it, it's going to double cook and it'll get harder and denser. So you want to avoid putting super hot things in your meatballs. You know, I should click on the Facebook. I think people are watching and asking questions and stuff. Somebody have a question? Oh, that's me talking. Okay, sorry. The Sklars are watching. Oh boy. Hey, everybody say hi to Mike Sklar and Colleen and Jack. Okay, so if you remember, last time what we did was we cut off the end and then we cut the onion like this. This time we're gonna do it the more traditional way. This is the more common way because we're gonna go for a finer dice. So what I do is I cut in the middle right there, and then I'm gonna make scores without separating it from the end all the way across, okay? And it's still together. It's still got a good base. You see, it's not going anywhere. And then we're gonna chop our pieces, and I would try to go for, you know, a little less than 1/4 inch dice, pretty small. You can get it pretty fine right here. Just watch your fingers. But you want to get a nice fine dice. I wouldn't take it, you know, too tiny because you want to get a little flavor from those onions. And then throw away the heel.
So just so we're on the same page, what kind of size are we looking for? A couple millimeters?
A little piece.
Because they'll shrink when they cook.
A little bit. But they're okay to have. They're going to get soft so that they're going to go into the meatball soft, and that you're not going to get a big bite of a raw onion. Some people do raw onions, though. I've seen a lot of recipes where people do raw onions, and it does cook a little bit in it. I just prefer them a little further along. There's also a sweetness that comes when you cook an onion, and I want that to be a part of my meatball.
One time I skipped cooking and it turned into a puddle of moisture inside the meatball because we didn't pre-cook it. You have to pre-cook it.
So once we're done chopping our onions, we're going to put those aside. Those are going to go right into the sauce after we take the garlic out. So we want to check our garlic now. We want to make sure that it's not brown. Got my wooden spoon, and I'm going to turn it up a little bit because it's barely moving. You want to have just a little bit of sweat coming on. You want to hear it sizzling a little bit, and you're going to want to make some sweat. The other component to the sauce. So here's how the technique's going to go with the sauce. Once we're done sweating the garlic, we're going to add the onions. We're going to sweat the onions. So we're going to cover them and we're going to let them cook down. We're going to take half of them out, and then I'm going to use a food mill. You can use your hands You can use a food processor. You can do whatever you want to get the texture of the tomatoes that you want. I'm going to run the tomatoes through the food mill. So let's talk a little bit about tomatoes while the garlic is sweating. Does everybody have a little action on their garlic? I have none. So you can see right now, mine's barely moving. It's just sitting still. So I'm going to turn it up a little bit. This pan takes a little longer to get warm because it's super thick. San Marzano Roma tomatoes. The thing you're looking for when you're making a sauce like this is the DOP. The DOP is a designation by the Italian authorities that these were made under certain guidelines. They have a certain acidity to them. They were grown in the soil in the shadows of Mount Vesuvius. There is no substitute. So that said, if you need a substitute, try to find the closest thing. The thing about them is that once I started using these, my sauce became consistent. When I would try whatever tomato they had at the store, I would get mixed results. Sometimes you'd have to add sugar because the sauce was too tart. This is a standard and a quality control that will ensure that every time you make your sauce, it's going to come out the same and it's going to come out fantastic. That said, if you can't get them, try to. You can buy them online. But if you can't, then try to find a San Marzano Roma tomato that may not be DOP. If you can't find a San Marzano Roma tomato, you'd probably be better off getting something from the farmer's market or the best looking tomatoes that you can find at your store. The thing you want to find out is it sweet? Because these are sweet.
So add.
Yes.
Even Safeway Select has a San Marzano. I know this was in a pinch. We're in quarantine time.
Right.
This is all I was able to find.
Right,
But
but
it's
the
at
thing you're
least a
missing on
San
that-
Marzano Roma
But the thing
tomato.
you're missing on that is it's not a
know.
DOP. So what happens is the Safeway
Hibiscus.
Select, they're growing those in the Central Valley in California, and there's no standard or quality control behind them. You can make a tomato sauce with them. It likely won't be the same thing you get with this. So the argument is I keep 4 of them, as you see, in my cupboard at all times. There's always a reason to have these on hand. So Eric, the next time I come up there, I will bring you a case of San Marzano Roma tomatoes, DOP. Okay, so I'm gonna put those aside.
Sorry, Adam.
Yes.
Hardware question. Which pot are you in? Are we going to cook just the sauce in one pot?
In this pot right here. If you look on the other camera, you can see.
Oh, sorry. So we're going to have one pot for sauce and one pot for cooking the decines? Yeah.
This is
got
for
it.
the sauce, and this other pot will be for the meatballs.
Perfect.
Okay, so you can see it's going. It's a little high. If you guys want to look and see the other camera, I'm going to turn it down because that's going to brown too fast. And I don't want the garlic to get brown. You see how it's browning right there?
Hey, Adam, I browned my garlic. I lost track. I forgot I didn't cover it. So should I start over?
Start over.
No, well, you're going to have to catch up to us because we're not going to slow the train, but yeah, you got to pay attention to these things and keep it super low.
So do
but
I
if you
take
wanna
the garlic
sweat-
out?
no, just
Let's
skip
save
it.
oil?
It's not gonna ruin your sauce if you don't sweat the garlic. It's just another layer of flavor. So, it's up to you whether you go back and do it. But if you want to keep up, what we're doing is we're building layers of flavor. So we're adding a garlic essence to the oil, and then we're gonna add the onions and then the tomatoes. Very, very
One
simple.
thing of this, I'm gonna take out the burnt garlic and
Okay.
figure it
Show me how burnt it is.
There, let me see here. Can you see that?
I can. I think it's okay. What you need is more oil in there. So add a little more oil and just pull that garlic out.
Got
And
it.
you'll dilute it. Does it smell
Yeah.
bitter to you?
Yeah, I think it smells good.
Okay.
I'm a garlic guy though, so.
It smells burnt to me.
There you go.
A lot more oil.
Okay.
But I agree with Adam. Just pull the garlics out so they don't burn more and get acidic. Good job, Adam.
Okay, so what's up next is we're gonna start getting our bowl together for our meatball while this is cooking. We're gonna multitask a little bit here. So I have, and again, quality counts, ingredients count. The hierarchy of meat that you want to use. Quite honestly, the time of the grind and how much compression. Like I always start to freak out because when I watch the butcher putting the meat in and then he compresses it down and wraps it up in his butcher paper, like even that's a little bit much for me. My obsessive compulsive nature starts to kick in because you don't want your meat highly compressed. The best meat that you could use is to get whatever type of meat you want, chuck or otherwise, and grind it right then and there, and grind some pork from a pork butt. And that's going to be your best loose. You do it on a 2 times through your wide grind on your grinder. To me, that's the best. The next thing would be to go to a butcher shop that's grinding it the day of, or if your Whole Foods does it the day of. And it really makes a difference. Higher quality meat, better meatball. I'm going to be doing a mix of just beef and pork today, because I couldn't get veal. In the time of COVID, veal is a little harder to come by. So I'm doing beef and I'm doing pork. The proportion that you can do really depends on your preference. And this is going to be one of those things that as you develop your meatball recipe, I'm sure we've all made meatballs before and we all have a preference. I tend to like about a 50-50 split between pork and beef. If I'm doing veal, then breaking it into thirds is okay. The thing about it is you're going to get the beefy flavor from the beef, obviously. The pork is going to give you the fat. It's going to give you juice. And the pork flavor is more subtle, so it sort of rounds out the beef. So if you tend to like beefier meatballs, there's a lot of restaurants that make beefier meatballs, you're going to put more beef. Before you put your hands in your meat, make sure that you wash them thoroughly. We should have started the whole thing by washing, but
It's a
most
pound of
definitely-
each.
I am doing less than a pound of each. I was doing a pound total for the recipe. I'm probably at about 1.5 pounds based on what I got from Olivier's. So Olivier's, if you're in San Francisco, Olivier's is a butcher shop down 2 blocks, 3 blocks from my house. It's a French butchery and they do amazing products. Olivier goes to the slaughterhouse. He picks out his animals. I'm going to show you guys. So the garlic is on here. It's about as brown as you want it to get. This is lightly browned. I think for shortening purposes, I would probably sweat it for another 10-15 minutes, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. So the essence is getting in there, and you're just trying to flavor that oil. So I'm going to pull that in a minute. But back to the meat. Italians use turkey, and let me go back to gallery view. Italians use turkey often. Veal is going to be more of a textural thing. Veal is going to be a little more tender, whereas the beef and the pork a little firmer. You guys are familiar with what ground pork comes out to be like. That's really actually an interesting combination. If you did pork and turkey, you'd have a really light meatball. But it's all about preference. Play around with it. If you have a preference of a particular type of meat, you like bison, you like, deer, whatever that's called, venison, then make your meatballs with the type of meats that you like. There's nothing limiting you to do that. A traditional meatball is going to be a mix of veal, pork, and beef. So what I'm doing right now is just sort of loosening it up, and we're gonna put that aside. The next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna make breadcrumbs. So I've got some of that bread that I made the other day, my first shot at sourdough. Sour bread adds a little heavier component to it. So, I usually recommend like an Italian batard or a sweet batard. But what I'm going to do is take, fresh or somewhat stale bread and put it right in the food processor. And I'm just going to pulverize it until it's down to nothing. Now, fresh bread is really essential here. I do not like a meatball that's made with breadcrumbs, dried breadcrumbs. You can try to rehydrate them in milk, but it just doesn't do it for me. It winds up being a dry, mealy component, whereas the reason that breadcrumbs are in meatballs in the first place was to add bulk because meat is expensive. And it actually adds a really nice textural component. It softens the meatball up. So you definitely want to have, some fresh bread. It's going to get loud.
How much?
You're going to want enough, I would say about a half to 2/3 of the size of your ground beef or your meat, sorry. So approximately, in volume, about half to a little bit more of what you have on the meat. Fresh
Excuse
bread.
me, Adam, is it okay to keep the crust on the bread, or should it just be the white crust?
I would cut the crust off if it's a firmer crust. If it's a softer bread, then you can get away with throwing the crusts in. But I cut the crusts off of this sourdough because it was super firm. And it's going to take a hot minute for these to really chop up because this was some denser bread. As you can see, it's putting my food processor to the test. If for some reason you have really stale bread and it does start to put your food processor to the test, you're going to put your milk in sooner rather than later. I am going to add the milk in while I'm processing the breadcrumbs. So it's going to help to really break it up and make it almost like a paste. So I'm going to drizzle the bread in, or the milk in to the bread. And I'm using, maybe a 1/3 of a cup of milk to a half, depending on how much bread you have.
Will you say those quantities again? Sorry.
So this is what I've got. You can see. So it's just like a milky coated bread paste that comes out. It's wet. You want it to be wet. And you don't want it to be too firm. So I might even put it in just a little bit more because this bread is firm. At the same time, I'm going to remove the garlic from the oil. There's my garlic. You can see it on this camera. Not burnt, but caramelized, I would say. Okay, so I'm turning this off, and so here's the thing about this garlic. Italians usually throw it away. They don't like raw garlic in their food as much as people think. You might save it. You can throw it back in your meatballs if you want. You can spread it on bread. It's sort of caramelized. It's yummy and tasty. You can do whatever you want with it, so you don't have to throw it away. It's a judgment call. Okay. We're gonna add the onions to the pot. We're gonna turn up the temperature on the pot that we removed the garlic from and add the onions. And we're gonna sweat them at a little higher temperature. And remember, we're only gonna use half of these for the sauce. We're gonna get them nice and golden. Stay golden, pony boy. Okay. How's everybody doing? You guys keeping up with me? Anybody lagging behind? Anybody need any?
What do you think if I put my garlic in the food processor with the breadcrumbs while I have it still there?
You could totally do it. If you want the garlic in your meatballs, that would be a good way to do it. You could also, if you're feeling like, look, you could do the onions in the food processor. You could do your parsley in the food processor. Everything, when we had the food truck, sometimes we needed to skimp on time. So there's a lot of shortcuts that you can take if time is a factor. All right, so what you're gonna wanna do is sweat these onions down, put the lid back on them, keep it at a medium temperature, and we'll come back to them in a few. So back to our mix. I'm gonna take my breadcrumbs and I'm gonna put them in. So as we start building up our batter, for lack of a better term, meat batter. Oh, that sounds yummy, doesn't it? Meat batter. We're gonna add that in, and in a way, it should almost have like a texture of ground meat. The general idea here is that I've got breadcrumbs that are providing bulk and substance to the meatball, a little loft, a little heft. I'm gonna wash out my food processor. And I am going to use the food processor again for a trick that you guys remember from when we did cacio e pepe. I prefer my Parmesan and Pecorino cheeses done in the food processor versus a microplaner. So I am going to use the food processor to grind up my cheese. It doesn't have to be super dry because it's just cheese. And you might want to also save some for topping later. Make sure you check your onions, chat. Not as in chat, like live stream chat, but as in chat butts and turn. So these onions are going. If you guys want to see it on the camera here, I'll pull up the
Thanks, Adam.
the gallery view. So you can see right here, our onions are going at a nice little clip.
Quick question about the onions that you threw into the pot.
Yes.
So in the recipe that you sent online, it was like a half an onion for the meatballs and a half an onion for the sauce.
Correct.
Is that still the case?
Yeah, we're gonna pull out half of the onions for the meatballs.
Oh, I see. I'll saute and then okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
This should be the whole onion in there right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, going back. We can continue to get our cheese grated if you guys are with me. You can also use a microplaner or a box grater or whatever works for you. I have all this leftover cheese from our cacio e pepe. So I'm going to grind it all because I'm going to be using it for my week of COVID eating, which means pasta every meal. And I'm trying to figure out how to get pasta into breakfast.
How much cheese are we grating?
I'm grating a lot. You just need about a half a cup grated. I'm not sure what the recipe said, but it should be somewhere around that. And if you remember, it starts to get a different sound as it gets lighter and lighter until it fades into a feathery, wispy, light and lovely grade of cheese that you would want to put on meatballs and pasta and everything else. Okay, so there's my grated cheese, and I'm going to put that in my pipe and smoke it. No, I'm going to put a bunch of it. Now here's the thing. Recipes. You know I don't dig recipes, so I am going to eyeball a boatload of cheese into my meatball. That was, maybe a half a cup. I like a lot of cheese. I like the flavor. This is a Pecorino Parmesan blend. You can use Parmesan. You can use Pecorino. You can use a combination. Whatever floats your boat. Okay, next up. Everybody with me?
On the cheese thing, I have a
Sorry.
ricotta here too.
Yes, we're getting there.
Sorry.
So is everybody with me? Yep. Good. You guys are pros.
Just a little behind on the cheese grating.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next thing is an optional item. Everything's optional. This is life, man. Everything's optional. But if you want to make a spicy meatball, then you want to add some spice. So my recommendation would be to put, teaspoon, tablespoon, whatever your preference is on spice. I'll probably put, I don't know, Judah doesn't like them too spicy, so I probably put a quarter to a half a teaspoon in there. Ricotta. So we're just adding, we're gonna check our onions, make sure our onions are sweating to the oldies. As soon as the onions get to a point where they're soft, I'm gonna take the lid off now. And again, you can see where we're at on the overhead cam. How fancy am I? You don't want to burn your onions. You don't want to overcook them, but you definitely want them to be soft. And as soon as they start to soften, then we're going to pull out half of them and put the half in the freezer so that they are nice and cool when we put them in our meat.
Hey, Adam, I have a question about the other part of the meat. There was like salami or a hard kind of a meat.
Yes, actually, that's a great question. And I'm sorry that I didn't mention that because I wasn't able to get what I wanted. So I omitted it from if you have mortadella, prosciutto, salami might be a little salty for me for this, but it could work. Mostly I use mortadella. That is my preferred meat, cured meat. What you want to do is put that in the food processor or in a grinder or chop it super fine and add that in. And I would say about a half a cup of it in this. It's going to give it an earthiness and it's going to give it a dynamic that I really love in meatballs, particularly mortadella. But I was not able to get some due to the COVID situation. So I had to. Yes.
If we have, all we could get was like salami, and
I'd say have that as an appetizer and don't put it in your meatball.
okay, I was gonna say, do we just not have salt or just have it as an appetizer?
Yeah.
Okay.
What about prosciutto?
What's that?
What about prosciutto?
I would, throw prosciutto in there. I think it's fantastic. Put it in your food processor or in a grinder or really chop it up finely.
Okay.
And throw it in. But yes, prosciutto would be fantastic. And you know what I forgot? Wine. So I'm gonna go get some wine.
Hey, Adam, I wanted to ask you two things. Should we leave the gelatin in the freezer?
Yeah, until we're ready. It should be soon. Is yours firmed up yet?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then I also
If
wanted
it's firmed up, pull it out.
Okay, and put it at room temperature?
Yeah, we're gonna use it shortly. Let me look at mine.
And then also, have we missed any salt and pepper action yet?
Not yet. Not mine firmed up too. Good call.
Can you check the gelatin in the freezer?
Okay.
Is the gelatin a necessity?
No. No,
Okay.
we talked about it totally optional. So here's my gelatin. It's actually got a little freezer on it because it went on the short side and it was on an angle, but it's solid. It's like, meat jello. Yummy, meat jello. Who's drinking with me?
Almost everyone.
Oh, I will be. I'm actually on a walk, Adam. This is a demo. I bought all the ingredients and I'm watching and I'm going to make them on Sunday.
Oh, okay. I want to back up from your mic a little bit, whoever that was. It's loud.
We're drinking.
Sorry, I'm outside. I'm talking too loud. I'm going to whisper.
So guys, cheers, everybody. Here, I'm going to put up on gallery view so we can all toast to each other. Cheers. Look at this beautiful crowd of people cooking. I love it. It keeps growing. K-Maz, what are you drinking back there? It looks like a martini or something.
Salud.
I saw Ina Garten making oversized cosmopolitans earlier this week. So
Lovely. Fantastic. How are you progressing, Andrew? Everything going well there?
Yeah, we're working out good. We got
Keeping up. I know you're a pro. Okay, so onions are done, and I'm gonna pull half of my onions out. I'm gonna turn it down, and I'm gonna put those in the freezer. Ideally, you want to put them in the fridge, both of these things, because if you put them in the fridge, they cool at a better rate. We're shocking them a little bit by putting them in the freezer, but this is for TV, so.
Half about.
All right, these are going in. Now.
We drain them.
What's
We
that?
drain them. You want us to drain those onions?
You can pull them out with a spoon. You can leave a little oil on them. It's not like you're not trying to get them super dry, but I would try to not like soak them in oil.
And the cheese goes right into the meatballs now?
Yeah, that was, yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna get our tomatoes into the sauce. As I said, I'm using a food mill, which is right here. And I like the texture. Here's the thing. I'm not like a chunky sauce person. I like a smooth sauce. Some people like to have big bits of tomatoes. Even when I eat rails, I usually like run it through a strainer or puree it. I know I'm weird like that, but I prefer a smooth sauce. So the food mill allows me to do that. But you can, if you want, take them, put them in a bowl, squish them up with your hands, and then dump them in. But we're gonna put our tomatoes in this sauce now.
Oh, actually, I'll just do it in here.
Ed, that's exactly what I used. Yes.
What is that?
The hand immersion blender.
Yes, an immersion blender works fine.
Because
So
we're
I'm putting them
using
on gallery view, and you can see them go through the food mill if you want. That's just a nice visual.
Oh.
So we're dumping the tomatoes right on top of the onions?
Right on the onions. And the garlic oil that we created. There we go. Sometimes the tomatoes take a second to get caught in the food mill, but once they're there, they're money. I remember when I had the food truck, people, one of the worst nights of my life was we got slammed on the food truck one night, and I had a white van. One other thing, guys, if your tomato sauce in your tomato can, I always take a little bit of water, wash it out, and get the remnants of the tomatoes in the can, and add that in. It's okay to cook it down and you use up all of the juice in the can. Okay, let's go back to speaker view. So I had a white van that had all it pulled the food truck was actually a trailer, and it pulled the trailer and it had all of our storage in it, and we got slammed and we ran out of sauce. I'm gonna turn this up to medium high now. I want to get it to cook down a little bit. we ran out of sauce, and that was it. We were going to have to close up for the night. But I had the ingredients for the sauce on the truck. So I go back to the truck, and I'm sitting on a bucket with this little guy, a little home food mill. It was before I realized that I needed to buy a commercial food mill, and was churning out can by can of these tomatoes to make enough sauce for, another 100 meatball orders, and cursing my life, and realized that was probably the moment where I realized that food truck life wasn't all it was cut out to be, despite Tommy and Amy's ample warnings.
I was gonna say, I hear these stories all the time. The worst night of my life.
Because Tommy, for those of you who don't know, Tommy and Amy owned the meatball truck. Before I bought it, they had a crab shack, and they warned me. They said it was going to be miserable, and I didn't
Crab
listen.
shack.
Hey, quick question for you.
Painted that even you thought it was horrible, so we feel like it was horrible.
What is your question?
How many ounces of tomato are we using? I used a can because it's a can.
It's a 28-ounce can.
28. All right. More is needed. Cool.
And if you look at the other camera, you can see what I got going on here. It does not look dissimilar to what Rails looks like. It's got a nice little oily base to it. So the oil, you can see right now it's separated. It'll get a little more incorporated as we cook it down. And you're going to want to have it. And you see the onions, just like in Rails. Theirs is a little bit chunky. They probably a rougher chop on the tomatoes. But that's what we're looking for. And then we're going to turn up the heat a little bit. Somebody's got a lot of noise coming through. Is somebody running the food processor and not muted? I think I found it.
Ethan and Jody, mute yourselves.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. So anyway, long story short, that was the point that I realized that I was probably in over my head a little bit. Okay, so 2 other additions that we're going to add. Again, everything's optional. I like ricotta in my meatballs. I like the dairy component that, you've got your milk, your cheese, your Parmesan cheese, and then I'm going to put a couple heaping tablespoons, if not all of, a third to a half of a cup of ricotta in there. As I look at it, the more that I put in there, the better it gets. It adds such a creamy component to it. I don't want to say that's the secret recipe because plenty of people do it, but to me, that's the secret sauce. That's what I think defines my meatballs, is the very certain addition of ricotta. Normally I would put 1 egg, but these eggs are kind of small. So I'm going to put 2 eggs in mine. And you don't have to scramble them in advance, but I'm going to, just because it makes it a little easier to incorporate when you put them in. The eggs are a binder. With all the wet and the dry that come together, they should bind pretty well. I don't think I've ever had a problem with binding, but I'm gonna toss these puppies in there. We're getting close, everyone. Okay, there are the eggs. And then I'm gonna chop up my meat jello. I'm just gonna peel it out onto my cutting board, and there is a lovely globule of gelatinous meat. If you smell it, it smells like beef stock. And I'm gonna chop it up finely, and I'm gonna toss that in there. And you can see on my sauce, it's starting to simmer and start to cook down a little bit. I didn't make a lot of sauce for this. You can easily double this recipe if you're doing it with pasta. Though, as you know, Italians do not serve pasta and meatballs together. So spaghetti and meatballs is an American invention. I'm sure you all know that. But Italians have what they call polpette, and it's usually served as an appetizer course, or a main course in place of the secondi, the carne. So it'll literally be your meat dish and served with vegetables. And you do not ever see meatballs on top of pasta. That's what we do. That's an American thing. And that's okay. My version is fairly American. Because I'm an American. I am, as you may or may not know, I am a quarter Italian. My 23andMe verified it. It's not something that my mother just told me to justify the amount of meatballs and sauce that we ate. My mother makes delicious meatballs. If you have a chance to try some of her meatballs, she does, very classic American style meatball, and they're very beefy. She goes to the beefy side. Okay, so I'm going to take all of this gelatin and toss that in. And then we're going to...
How finely chopped did you do the gelatin?
About the same as the onions, pretty fine. And clean off my cutting board. Turn the sauce down a little bit. You don't want the sauce to get completely cooked down. So yeah, my mother and her meatballs. I'm trying to think of any meatballs that, I think hers were the only meatballs that I really cared for growing up. I think Tony's Baltimore Grill had decent meatballs, if I remember. No, actually not decent, but comfort food, like what we like. They're very smooth consistency. And here's the thing. Some meatball recipes will call for this, and I highly recommend if you prefer it. Some people like meatballs with the smooth texture. And you can get that simply by putting your mix that we're making here, our meat batter, into the food processor. You can do half of your batter into the food processor. It depends on what your objective is. I like a more loose and grainy meatball myself. I am, there are certain times when I enjoy a smooth meatball, but, and I have plenty of times put it in the food processor. But when I'm making my special meatballs, I will usually not process them. But Tony's Baltimore Grill had, yep.
Those onions in the fridge yet, is that right?
Yeah, the onions are in the freezer. Mine are in the freezer. And I'm going to pull them out shortly. The next thing we want to do is salt. Now, guys, I say this every time. Salt is a matter of preference. You got to understand volumes of food, density of food, to how much salt you put in there. If I'm going to give you a guess, I'm going to say for this amount that I'm doing here, that's maybe a tablespoon and change. And what you can do is, and I highly recommend this, and maybe we'll do it together. We'll fry off a taster. Okay, this is the opportunity you have. I'm mixing it with a spoon right now. I'm gonna get my hands in there in a minute once I get the onions in. So I'm gonna go pull my onion. Yes, please. They're still a little warm, but they've cooled down enough that they're not gonna ruin my batter. They're not gonna create dense spots. And then I'm gonna wash my hands one more time.
If they're still pretty warm, is that okay?
Like I said, as long as they're not piping hot. I mean, you want to get them cool, but for time purposes now, it's not going to kill it. They may not be optimal, but these are just little details that when you add them all up, make a banging meatball. Okay, so I'm going to wash my hands. And I'm going to squish my hands all through here. And get it all incorporated. The main thing you're trying to do here is to spread out your breadcrumbs, because the breadcrumbs tend to clump up a little bit. You don't want to overwork your meat, but the ricotta cheese and the breadcrumbs need to spread out a little bit. So.
And at this point, we put the onions in, is that right?
Onions are in, yes. And in fact, that's it. That is the last of the ingredients. Oh, I'm sorry, parsley. Forgot the parsley. So I'm going to chop up some parsley really quickly. I like to have a little herbaceousness in it. Parsley's, you know, the lightest of them. My apologies for forgetting that. So we'll do a quick rough chop on the parsley. And the amount you use, it's a matter of preference as always. Don't mistake parsley, Italian parsley for cilantro, because I won't come to your house. That stuff is vile.
Neither will I.
The devil's pubic hair.
Adam, how much ricotta? I think I missed it.
About, I would say about half a cup.
Perfect.
Little less, little more, depending on how much you like of the ricotta. So we're gonna just pick over and get the big stems out of some parsley. I put out way too much here, so you don't need to do that much. Just enough to give it a little greeny, herbaceous vibe. You could use dried oregano, very acceptable. I think basil's a little strong, but some people use basil, or just like an Italian herb blend. It's a matter of preference. It's a meatball. Sklar, are you still watching?
Hey, Adam, can I share something with you?
I would love to see it.
Okay, this is our projector in our living room, and this is my 8-year-old daughter who is in love with this cooking demonstration. So thank you for doing this for us.
Wait, show me the projector again.
I also have to shut it off.
Oh, that's fantastic. Hi. What's her name?
What is her name?
Her name's Mackenzie. Look here, Mac.
Mackenzie, you're a rock star.
This has been awesome. Thank you very much.
Oh, no worries. Hopefully we make some meatballs. I hope I don't disappoint on the meatballs. All right, so there's my parsley. I'm gonna do a fairly fine chop on the parsley. Check your sauce every once in a while too and stir it. Mine's looking pretty good. We're gonna add salt, and if you want, you can also hit it with a little bit of crushed chili peppers as well if you want a little spice to it. So quick chop on parsley.
You just add something to the sauce?
No.
Salt, pepper?
Nope.
Or no?
Nothing. Not yet. We're gonna add salt at the very end. You don't want to add salt before it cooks down. I apologize. This one's gonna go a little longer than the other ones because we started so late. Thanks, Facebook. Okay. Actually, it could have been Zoom. I've been hearing Zooms freaking out on their popularity. We've been using them for a long time, for years. Love them. Okay. So now I got my parsley in there. I'm mixing it up. This is my final batter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fry off a taster. Okay. And the trick to frying off a taster is I'm going to put a fair amount of oil in the pan. And so we're switching over to this pan right here. I'm going to dry it out. It's got a little bit of moisture in there. And then I'm going back to my flavored oil from the tortilla española. You can use whatever olive oil you'd like. I would say don't use, the super spendy stuff on this, but you want to put a nice little layer on the bottom of your pan. And you're going to get it up to a medium-high heat. And we can go to gallery view so you guys can see on Facebook what the pan looks like. So here we are. I'm setting up my station now. So what I want is I'm gonna have a little spatula. I like this spatula. This is a fish spatula, and it's probably my favorite all-around spatula tool in the kitchen. Use it all the time. I've got scoops. Got a 2-ounce scoop. I got a 1.5-ounce scoop, depending on what size meatball you make. Let's talk about the size of your balls right now. I prefer smaller meatballs. I don't like a big mountainous meatball. It's too much. I like, probably the 1.5-ounce scoop. But I've been known to make them super tiny, and it's okay. I like the crust to meat ratio. So whatever your preference is on size, size doesn't matter to some people. I got to stop with these stupid innuendos. The other thing is cooking method. Okay, so this is a big controversial thing in the meatball world. There are multiple ways that you can cook meatballs. I'm going to talk to you about my way. I'm going to talk to you about other ways. In Italy, we took a class this summer at Rimessa Roscioli, which is part of Salumeria Roscioli, my favorite restaurant. And they made a meatball, a polpette. And they told us that you absolutely put it right in the sauce, raw. And that's their technique. And I disagree. I do not like a meatball cooked directly in the sauce. It leaches out all the fat. It doesn't get any texture to it. It becomes soft and mushy. It's edible. It's decent. Not my cup of tea. Not what I'm looking for in a meatball. You might like that. If you like that, cook it that way. That's fine. But I might judge you, or I won't judge you. No, I'll be nice. The other way to do it is to take a sheet pan and scoop out your meatballs and pop them in the oven. And then once you pop them in the oven, they cook all the way through, and you pop them in your sauce. So similar concept, but what you're doing is you're sealing in the juices by cooking them in the oven. But they still leach out some of the fat. It just happens. And they absorb a lot of the flavor of the sauce. The technique that I use, and I don't know where I came up with it, I think I just preferred it when I experimented with recipes when I was starting the meatball truck, is to sear the meatball first. There's two things that I like about it. By searing the meatball, you're locking in the juice. You're putting a crust on it that makes it difficult for the juice to release. I've heard people argue that that's not actually the case. On Serious Eats, they did a thing about, when you sear a steak first, do you actually sear in the juices? On meatballs, I'm almost positive it does happen. Secondly, there's a little thing that I like called the Maillard effect. And that is that when you put a crust on something with high heat, it makes it sweet. And I like the crust that comes on a meatball, the contrast of the outside versus the inside, the sweetness, the onions and the cheese all kind of get a little Maillard going on it. And to me, it makes the best meatball. I don't like them submerged in sauce for a long, long time. I think that you want the meatball to taste like a meatball, the sauce to taste like a sauce. You're not making a bolognese here where the flavors all meld together. So I cook the meatball, I sear them, and then I'll put them in the fridge, not in sauce. And when I'm reheating them, I will heat up the sauce and toss them in the sauce just for a minute. So that's my take on the cooking method. And with that, let's get to it. I'm going to put us back in gallery view. Anybody have any questions on this? All right. So we're going to do a tester here.
I got a question. Sorry, Adam.
Yes.
So we're making a double recipe, but we want to like freeze half for later. So should we, or whatever you think for
cook them off and then freeze them.
Got it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thanks.
So when you say sear, is that like a saute with hot oil?
Yes. So if you look at the other camera that I have going, look at the other Azola. I've got a cast iron pan. You can use a nonstick pan. You can even use a stainless steel pan. The pan, most of the time it doesn't matter. Stainless steel might stick a little bit easier, but because of the cheese. But what you're going to do is get it pretty high heat, like medium high, and then we're gonna sear it off. So I'm gonna take a little sampler here. I'm gonna.
How much oil do you have in there?
It's about less than 1/4 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sear off. I'm actually gonna press it down, not into a round shape because it'll cook faster. Okay, so the sampler that I'm doing, I will make flatter. It's just like a hamburger because it allows me to cook it faster and not have to turn it so many times. And I'm just doing this for taste. So the other thing is I also want to check the temperature of the oil. So I'm going to sear off one, and if it needs more salt, this is going to be the time. If it needs more pepper, if it needs more cheese, if it's not holding together because you need more egg in it, too much breadcrumbs, whatever, you have a chance to fix it. Always sample your meatballs before. And then it gives me a chance to drink.
Hey, what kind of oil do you recommend?
Olive oil.
Avocado?
Olive oil.
Perfect. Thank you.
Because it does pick up some of the flavor.
Yes.
And what we're looking for is a nice little crust. You'll see it cook. And then you can flip it over and have a look. It's going to look like a hamburger. And you want to cook them all the way through. Meatballs, actually, no, let me say, you want to cook this one all the way through. When we're making our meatballs, I would say you're going to get the crust, but you want to try to get it so that your meatball doesn't cook all the way through when you're making your batch, because then when you throw it in the sauce, it'll finish its cooking and it'll be quick. But don't overcook your meatballs now. Undercook them in the pan, except for your taster, because your taster, you don't want to bite into pink. Okay, so see the brown I have on that one? I like it.
Also, I see that it is probably a good idea to do it in a deeper vessel, because otherwise
Fairly deep, yeah.
get the oil.
I turned my sauce off, by the way.
Adam, can I ask you a question? If you did this in your food, if you did this in your food cart, would you? This is the method, or is this the home method? In the food cart, you have to like bake them.
This is the home method. On the food cart, we needed to do volume, so we would put them on baking trays and bake them off. We would broil them so that we would get somewhat of a crust, but it proved impossible for us to cook them to order this way. So if you're making, I would say 1,000 meatballs a day was what we were doing. You probably want to find a faster method. Okay. So we're gonna let that go. Oh. Everybody surviving this craziness. I mean, guys, we have never lived through a time like this in our lives. We've had some crazy stuff. September 11th was probably the closest thing to, like, in my lifetime, a national rally or you know, a unified experience on this level around disaster. So it's getting a little hot in here. I'm gonna flip it back to the other side really quick, and then I'm gonna pull it off and taste it. Just got to be cooked all the way through. And if you're using cast iron gets super hot, and then it stays hot, so you can turn the temperature down. I have a cooling rack. You guys see? There's my meatball, my little tester, Testy McTester. Trying to find the camera on this thing over here. Okay, there it is. So that's what one of them looks like. And once it cools down enough for me to bite it. Yes. I can use a little more salt. Big Ed, you got a meatball? Yeah. Actually, it doesn't need more salt. Mine's good. All right. So now we're going to get into production mode. What you want to do, get your scooper out. And what I do is I start by lining a circle in my pan. So I go starting at 6 o'clock, and then I just work my way around the pan. So I know where to come back to. And I like the uniformity, so I'm using a measuring scoop so that each one comes out about the same size. My pan is super hot right now. Might be a little too hot because it's cast iron. I'm gonna turn it down. I'm also getting a lot of splatter because there's a lot of moisture in these guys. That's to be expected. You're gonna mess up your kitchen quite a bit. But you guys can see how I'm creating a wheel of
Adam,
meat.
what's the heat on that under your meatballs right now?
What's the what?
Heat.
The
Is that
heat,
medium?
medium high.
Medium high. Got it.
I mean, you want to get a sizzle, right? By the time I get around the wheel here, it's going to be ready to turn the first one and work my way around. So, just like Nana's Kitchen back in Brooklyn. I did not have a Nana, nor did I live in Brooklyn, by the way.
Yeah. Do you mind dressing it up however you want, and I'll mix it up?
Zebra, for clarification, we're rolling and dropping straight in the oil.
Yeah, if you look at the other camera, you can see what's going on mine right now. I've already got a gaggle of meatball.
Do this too. Just make it twice as fast.
How's that look? Well, I see an Austria Strong logo in the picture. Everybody, make sure you care for your bone density health.
Hey, Chatty, if you're doing a double batch, cook them in double batches so you don't crowd the pan.
Exactly.
Yeah, you guys want to make sure that you don't overcrowd your pan. Leave space between them. Because then you won't be able to get your crust all the way around. So that's looking pretty good. And now I'm going to check them. I also always keep this guy handy because that's a great way to turn them. You use this to loosen them if they stick at all. Your spatula, and then you can turn them. I'm going to let them go a little bit more. How's everybody doing? Is everybody frying?
So are we looking like at size of a golf ball?
Ish. Yeah. I think golf ball is a good size. Did you guys taste them? Did everybody taste one? And how did they taste to you?
Oh yeah, it was great.
Really good, Andrew. Yeah.
Who is it?
My balls were really good. So Zolot, we tasted one. We added a little bit more salt, a little bit more pepper, and now I'm rolling them. And I like to just drop it in the sauce.
You like to what?
I just drop it in the sauce.
You do you, brother.
This is how my Italian cousin taught me to do it.
Yeah, And then put that.
Yeah, I mean, they tried to tell us in Rome that that was the way, and it just doesn't work for me.
See,
Go ahead.
Sarah, you were there.
Yeah,
What'd you think?
I like them with a crisp outside as well.
Yeah.
So I have a question. My Le Creuset, I mean, they're sticking a little bit.
So that's why you have one of these to get underneath it. Mine stick a little bit too.
Okay.
That's the cheese.
Yeah.
sweaty balls.
I'll put these for you. So they're falling apart is the problem.
If your meatballs are falling apart, then you need more binder. How much egg did you put in?
I put 2.
That should be good. Handle them gently until they cook all the way through.
We're actually doing half like you are in a pan, and then we're going to do the other half on our smoker and see how those turn out. So we're interested to see.
Oh,
how
that'll
it's-
be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. Have some fun with it, I guess.
Love that.
I'm all for experimentation. And look, I've said this before. Every time I cook, I like to say this. My recipes, my techniques are a foundation to get you comfortable with, playing with something. And I fully expect and hope that everybody will use what they learn and improve it, make it the way that they like it. That the technique that I teach should allow for a lot of experimentation.
Hey, Adam, as we're finishing up these meatballs, where are we sending them?
I'm sorry?
Where should we put the meatballs as they're getting brown?
Once you're done, you put them on a tray, like a wire rack if you've got one. If not, you can just put it right on a pan. I mean, on a serving platter.
Adam, if you find that your sauce is a little too acidic, what do you add to it to mellow it out?
If it's too acidic, I would say Parmesan cheese would balance out acid, maybe some stock to cut the acid. Is it the tomatoes that you got?
Probably.
And we haven't salted our sauce yet. You could put, some crushed peppers, and sugar is always like the main thing. Like if they're too tart, then sugar is the thing that a lot of people will add. This is the problem that I solved. That there were sauces that I had when I was growing up that I made many times. I put salt in my sauce, by the way. And it was just using a different tomato that made all the difference to create consistency. So the meatballs are almost done. And again, the ideal scenario here is that you undercook them a little bit and then finish them in the sauce. How's everybody doing on timing?
Hey, Adam, I have an observation. I went a little wet with the ricotta cheese, and so I think I got maybe a little wet in my batter, and they're kind of trying to fall apart, and so I only cooked half a batch so far. So I think maybe add breadcrumbs.
Breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
Breadcrumbs.
That's awesome, Ed. I think I did the same thing. So thank you for that. I'm gonna do the same thing.
Yeah, if your meatballs wind up being a little too wet, that means you probably didn't put enough breadcrumb in it. And that's an easy fix when you do your sampler. So I'm just loosening these and then I'm going to pull them in a minute.
Hey, Adam, have you done any ground pepper yet?
No, I don't put pepper in my meatballs.
Oh, okay.
You can do that, certainly. I put the chili flake in there, but I do not do ground pepper.
And Adam, there's no other Italian spices in this or the sauce. It's salt, pepper, and chili pepper?
Correct. We're going to put basil on the sauce at the very end. So what you could do is if you're so inclined and you have the bandwidth right now, you can chiffonade some basil. Jennifer got me this lovely little mini basil guys right here. Thank you.
Hey, Adam, how do you prevent the meatballs from sticking? Like yours really kept, look at that. It's like a whole piece. It doesn't like tear off at the bottom.
Yeah, you have to, I was using this spatula.
It's all about the spatula?
Yeah, and loosening them with the spatula. You can also, you know, a really good nonstick makes all the difference.
A nonstick, that can
A nonstick pan to fry them in.
Oh.
A good seasoned cast iron as well.
Should have used a cast iron and all.
So
The ones that break up become bolognese tomorrow.
What's that?
The meatballs that fall apart in the sauce will be bolognese, right?
If that's, I've done that before. Certainly there's been a time in my life, maybe I was a little drunk or otherwise, and made some bolognese. Okay. So my meatballs are off. Look, it takes practice to get the feel for the proportions.
Look at this
There are
shit.
my meatballs.
Look at this.
Look. There are my meatballs. I'll put them on here so you can see them in the other camera.
Oh, perfect.
So, little orbs of love. Oh, I just saw one, somebody zooming in. Those look great.
Of course they look great. Notice how they all perfectly fit on the cooling rack.
It's fantastic.
Well, we had to eat a few extra, but.
So I'm gonna make a little chiffonade of my basil. Just taking the basil, rolling it up, and then some tight slices, because that's gonna go on top, and then give it maybe a couple cross chops. Okay, I'm ready to get into the finish. And what I'm gonna do for the finish is I'm gonna grab a small frying pan, not the big one, because I'm just gonna do a portion. Where did he go? Okay, so I'm gonna take this little guy, and I'm gonna put some sauce in it, and I'm gonna toss my meatballs with the sauce. I'm gonna hit it with a little finishing olive oil, a little good olive oil. I like a little chili in my sauce, but I'm not adding it to the main sauce because Judah doesn't like it. And I'm gonna spoon out enough that it will coat my meatballs once the oil gets hot. And then I'm gonna
toss meatballs in, some sauce, and then we're gonna plate. You guys are busy little bees there. I'm gonna get some more wine.
You're doing great, Adam.
The thing to remember, guys, is there is a balance. You're going for moist. And with all of these wet ingredients, maybe I had more bread in my food processor than you guys did. It's a fairly loose meatball. We're looking for moist. So if you're finding it to be too loose, add more breadcrumbs next time. It actually is surprising how much breadcrumb goes into these meatballs. That, like I said, it was half the quantity of the meat about is what I look for. And it's, you know, it's equally as important as the meat itself. Okay, so I'm gonna drop these in here. Let's do 5 meatballs for an order. It's a generous order. I'm just gonna get this going really quick and then add some sauce to it. And we're gonna call it. Jennifer, how are your meatballs? I see you eating.
So good.
Yeah? Does that mean I don't get invited over anymore? You can make your own?
I'm sure yours are better, but this is pretty damn good.
Okay, so.
Show us, Jenna. Show us, Jen.
Adam, if we want to use, how do you know to use egg versus breadcrumbs for loose meatballs?
Gotta feel. You gotta just get a sense for what's gonna hold it together for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I could put together an exact measurement for, you know, what I do, but it's not gonna help you define what you like, right? So I'm just heating up the sauce in the meatball. It's gonna finish cooking all the way through because I kind of let them go a little pink in the middle. I'm just getting a bit of a poach on them. And then I'm gonna pull them. I'm gonna plate them. Get out of there. Fruit fly once in. Sauce them.
Yum.
I'm gonna hit them with some formaggio. All around the plate, and then a little basil. And guys, there is my meatball.
Yummy. I can't wait to make these.
There it is on the other camera. Let's give Facebook a shot of those.
Bravo,
Did
bravo.
it hang up? I think I lost that camera. Oh, it says temperature. Your iPhone needs to cool down. I guess it was sitting in the heat. All right, so I will take some pictures of this before I bite into it. I already know what it tastes like. You guys saw me eat it already. Let me see if any of these are cooked all the way through enough. I can eat around it. Oh my God. It's so good.
When you toss them in the sauce there, are you putting oil down first?
I put a little oil down, yes.
Can you just show us how much sauce you're doing, just out of curiosity? Like, show us your finished product.
Just enough to coat it.
When it's done right, it's a damn good meatball. Anybody have any questions about the technique? I know that some of you came up with loose meatballs. You know how to remedy that. Is there anything that I can answer before we sign off here?
Wait, do you just leave?
What's that?
Do you just leave them in the braise, in the red sauce braise?
Yeah,
Or
and then plate
until
them.
you eat them later?
Yeah, well, no, if you're gonna eat them later, leave them on the pan and put them in the fridge in a plastic bag. Here we go. I finally got my camera back. I'm gonna get some pictures here. So everybody good? No questions?
When are you going on Top Chef, Adam?
Never. I'm not that good.
You are good.
I appreciate that, Drakes, but I'm a practiced amateur. We're gonna do on Monday. We're gonna do latkes. Many of you have been. Oh, here. I think the camera's back now. Let me go back to Zoom real quick.
Adam, we appreciate you and you doing this. It's such a great respite from the crazy right now.
There's the meatball. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah. So
It
you
is
can-
so awesome.
Thank you so much, Adam.
And
I love you guys. I really appreciate all of you. This actually helps me to occupy my time. This helps me to put my creative juices to work. I love sharing it with all of you guys. I hope the meatballs are good. I hope you learn something about it. And if you need answers and want to have questions with me anytime, you know where to find me. And I'll see you guys on Monday for the latkes.
Adam, I have a
Good.
question.
Thank you, Ad.
Oh, we got a quick question. Yes.
Yeah. My fear is that I'm not cooking them enough. Like, how do you really know that they're done in the middle?
Try one.
Try one.
Try it. See. And if it's not done, put it back on.
Okay.
Delicious.
All right, guys. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey, Ronald. Amy.
Bye.
Thanks, Ad.